The Bhavishya Puran mentions very clearly about how the famous king of ancient India, Shalivahan, met Jesus of Nazareth, Isa Masih, Isa Nath. How this very mystical figure described the immaculate conception, the strange circumstances of his birth, the place of his birth, and so on, which all indicate that indeed this king of India had encountered none other than Jesus of Nazareth himself. That is one thing. The second thing is that Jesus has been included in the Nath pantheon of India. He is called Isanath in the tradition of Matsyendranath, Gorakhnath, and so on. And according to Nath legend, he was very much in India for a period of his time. Now, it's very interesting that all mentions of Jesus in the New Testament of the Bible cease from the time he is 13 years of age till he's 30 years of age. So there's a 17-year unexplained period where he's supposed to have been in the desert absorbing teachings and so on and so forth. Now, according to Indian traditions, several, not just Hindu but also Buddhist, Jesus traveled with the Essenes, a very esoteric, a very mysterious sect. He traveled with them to India and absorbed the teachings of Vedanta, spent time in Puri, spent time in Banaras and other holy places of India, and very importantly, spent time studying Buddhism also. Now, what I find very intriguing is the account of a very reliable figure. That person is Swami Abhedananda. Now, Abhedananda was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, a brother monk of Swami Vivekananda, who in his own right established great credibility, great authority on Vedanta in America, in the West, and in India. He had a short but brilliant life, naturally overshadowed by Vivekananda, but brilliant nonetheless. Now, Abhedanand has written a book about his travels to Kashmir and Tibet, and there he mentions very specifically about how when he went to Hemis Monastery in Ladakh, he encountered ancient texts. He was shown ancient manuscripts giving full details about how Jesus spent time in India. Great details about his life. And Abhedanand says it is a first-hand account. He has been an eyewitness to those accounts. And he's written on it. Now, several years before him, there was this Russian explorer called Notovich who had delved into the subject, but he was ridiculed. It seemed that he was not telling the truth. But the great credibility about the story is Abhedanand substantiating it. And for me, that really confirms certain theories about how Jesus had in fact come to India and how there had been this intense period in his life between the age of 13 and 30, which was spent in great meditations, in the great search for truth. And if you examine the statements of Jesus, some of them are exceedingly mysterious, exceedingly mystical, and echo the Upanishads in a way. Let's look at the kingdom of God is within you. Now, this is entirely akin to the Upanishadic Aham Brahmasmi. It seems almost an echo of that. So really the whole point is this whole artificial separation between the Abrahamic religions and the Indic religions is, to my mind, completely falsified by the gatekeepers of religion. People who don't want others to see the totality of truth, the totality of the mystic search. They want to monopolize their religion and not permit that there have been interconnections, there have been influences and so on. And Jesus is a great flowering. Jesus belongs to neither west nor east. He belongs to the entire world. So, what is the problem in accepting that he had, in fact, in so many ways, echoed the greatest teachings of the ancients? Naturally, in his own way, through his own spiritual genius, through his intense compassion, and so on. But the whole point is that this rather insensitive writing of Eastern religions' influence upon the Abrahamic religions is really very absurd. Sanatan Dharma has a great universality. It has many dimensions, and each teaching in the world can find an identification with Sanatan Dharma. Why? Because it has so many colors. It seems like it has all the colors of the rainbow, all the colors of the cosmos within it. It is very encyclopedic in scope. It does not exclude anything, it includes everything. And in that spirit, if we examine the correlations between Jesus of Nazareth and Hinduism, we would find exceedingly deep parallels. Now, in a modern context, something very interesting comes to mind. You see, look at Sri Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna taught in parables, so too did Jesus. And regarding Ramakrishna, there's a very interesting story. You see, several of his disciples were very well read, university educated boys. It was the age of the Raj, and really they had access to professors from England. They had a first-hand account of what religion meant to the Western world and so on. And on that count, their interest in spirituality, their interest in the spirituality of Europe, of England and so on, was a very alive one. It lent itself to a lot of discussion. It lent itself to a lot of interlocution, a lot of confabulation with people directly from the West who were engaging with them. And Jesus became a sort of a favorite subject, naturally, because such an intriguing figure who represents the entirety of man's search. Strangely enough, Sri Ramakrishna used to question these boys about Jesus, their views on him, and he used to love to engage on Jesus. And one day he told them something rather strange. He says that he felt the presence of what he believed to be Jesus of Nazareth. And he saw a vision of him. And in that vision, he's described the features of Jesus, the physical characteristics of Jesus. And he also says that Jesus had a long nose, what we'd consider the nose, the typical Jew nose, as in, a characteristic of, it's like there's a Roman nose, there's a noses can have a certain racial characteristic. And he said that what was strange about it was that it ended with a blunt end, it kind of just had a blunt end on it. So the boys who were discussing this with Ramakrishna found it rather strange and odd, because there's no depiction of Jesus with this oddly shaped nose ending in a blunt end. And they thought not much of it, till one day one of the boys came back in great excitement, because he'd been in the library and he chanced upon this very old Syrian coin, an exceedingly ancient Syrian coin, which has been dated as having the most ancient depiction of Jesus of Nazareth. You see, the Middle East was where the entire birth of Christianity took place. All the Abrahamic religions took place. And in and around Syria and so on, there had been some coinage. And in one of the coins, there was this profile of Jesus's, his face. And oddly enough, the nose was shaped just as Sri Ramakrishna had indicated. Long, but instead of ending in a sharp end, it had a blunt end. So it was very intriguing for them, because There's no way Ramakrishna could have access to this. And in any case, this was not a very popular depiction of Jesus at all. But it was dated as the most ancient depiction of Jesus of Nazareth. So, well, there are these several anecdotes, these several connections between mystics of India and Jesus. And of course, in the folklore of India, in the very mystical life of India, Jesus is not excluded. He is not looked at as an outsider, an alien entity, and so on. In fact, in the Nath tradition, he is regarded as very much intrinsic, a different facet of the diamond called mysticism. You see, the whole thing about religion is that it has become very, very blunt. It has become very, very non assimilative. And why is that? That is because people are judging others' religion. Instead of progressing far enough on their own mystical search, we are busy judging others' religion. And therefore, we do not experience the deeper aspects of religion. So, religion has become a tool which allows us to talk about others. It has stopped being a tool for us to move toward our own enlightenment. It has become theology. It has become theory. It has become about temples, churches, and so on. The whole idea of the ancient Sanatan Dharma is that the whole universe is a temple. The whole cosmos is a temple. The forest is a temple. And within that temple, you can find the fragrance of your most absolute being. You can find the highest consciousness of your essential self. And out of that, you are born again. Out of that, all that is relevant in religion comes to you. You see, it's not difficult to draw parallels between the Bhagavad Gita and Jesus' words. It's not difficult to draw parallels between the Vedanta and Jesus' words, or the Raj Yoga texts and Jesus' words. One can do that. One can have a series of lectures on that. One can have a series of lectures on books on this subject. There are so many parallels, but that is not the point. The one essential point is that it is the quality of the mystic, it is the quality of Jesus which is more important than his persona as projected by the institutionalized religions. It is his compassion that is important, and that links him to Gautam Buddha. It is his avowal of man's infinity within himself which is important, which resonates with the Vedanta. It is his insistence on true courage from within, leaving all else behind, that is echoed and akin to the Bhagavad Gita. So it is absolutely at a mystic level joined together spontaneously. But if we choose to look at differences, there is no end. And differences, remember, are peripheral. At the subtle, you'd find a climate where things can coexist. You see, we talk about the weather and the climate. One changes with time. Weather is a fickle thing, but the climate is something which defines the characteristic of the space. And so too with mysticism, so too with spirituality. Don't look at the changing circumstances, the changing cultures, and so on. That is peripheral. Look at the unchanging truth. Look at the climate of being. Look at what creates this quest of mysticism in the first place, and that which Jesus represents. In that way, you begin to dissolve all those apprehensions about us being completely separate and so on. No, the fact of the matter is that we are joined together in this entirety of truth that surrounds us, this entirety of cosmic glory that surrounds us, and which Jesus really represents in a way. He represents it in microcosm, in a living being. And in such a young life, the New Testament, it's just 3 years of teaching between the age of 30 and 33 till he's crucified, Jesus. And interestingly, the Indian story is about his coming back to India, settling down in Kashmir, living till 120 years and so on. That's another chapter in the Jesus story in India. In fact, that is very intriguing. So, in fact, that's a longer chapter, because you could say it's a 70 odd, 80 odd years here again. And of course, there are theories about Kashmir and the lost tribes of Israel and so on. We'll keep that for another time. The point of the matter is that forget about the outward structure of religion. Care about the inner. And when you care about the inner, all the mystics resonate with the same higher truth.